First of all, let's get this out of the way. This video contains spoilers and is intended as a discussion on what makes this movie worthwhile and, dare I say, inspiring. This is not a review of the film nor a summary. I've watched The Vanishing of Sidney Hall 3 times now, and each viewing was just as engaging, if not more, than the previous one. There's just something about this film that I cannot place exactly, which strikes me as masterful. Pointing my finger at something feels almost like a shot in the dark, but maybe it's this. This movie strikes a sweet spot between being a really serious drama with realistic, heavy-hitting story beats and developments and being a teenage coming-of-age story with mystery elements, but of course, including some unrealistic hyperboles that are commonplace in the latter genres. It is my opinion that maybe this balance right there is what allows this movie to move the viewer emotionally to such an extent while maintaining an overall serious tone and getting away with its dark elements. This movie does not have a tone problem. Well, maybe except that part where Sidney's publisher does not wear pants. That joke really didn't land, or maybe it didn't land the third time, I don't know. The point is the heartbreaking tragedy that befalls the characters, and there's a lot of it, and the light-hearted teenage-ish moments in the film meld together to enhance each other and lift the project upwards. Let's take a look at a couple of those. First, our protagonist, Sidney Hall himself, has a mentally slow father and an abusive mother. The case can be made that she is an abusive, at least for the most part, and that granted, she comes off as incredibly nosy and, most importantly, distant. Really distant. If that wasn't enough, Sidney's carelessness with Brett's tape, in part, leads to its impairment, and Sidney carries the ghost of his past as a burden during the rest of his life. Also, his wife and he almost separate, and just when they're about to get together again as a soon-to-be mother and father, she dies due to respiratory failure in front of him. Finally, a big fan of his book, Suburban Tragedy, kills himself, and Sidney internally assumes partial responsibility for that as well. Sidney's mother is married to a person with mental disability and yells about not having a choice when she got pregnant at a very young age and probably inadvertently with Sidney. Her son leaves her because of her unbearable presence in his life. Francis Bishop, Pulitzer Prize co-contender with Sidney, suffers his wife's loss as well as his son's detachment from him. Sidney's dad is mentally disabled and he's living in an unhappy marriage with a detached wife and to some extent a detached son. Brett finds himself in a never-ending living hell as his dad rapes his sister Darcy and hits him, maybe even rapes him. Judge Newport rapes other kids as well, and Brett knows and has known this from a very early age. His video recording of one such incident is destroyed while it lay in the keep of Sidney, all the while the two were planning to go to the police with it. He commits suicide. As you can tell, this story is full of depressing, utterly crushing moments that could make for a great drama. But the writers didn't stop there. The coming-of-age literature element is here as well, demonstrated in Sidney's "I crossed the line" cardboard box message, for instance, in the teen time frame that is brought up later in the adult time frame. I found parts of the movie like this cheesy. I think if the whole movie was based upon moments like these, it would be a very corny coming-of-age thing like The Spectacular Now and The Perks of Being a Wallflower. Movies in which there is no major counterfactor, no destructive force that brings the characters to their knees and that makes the corny moments feel earned and in order. Or if there is, it isn't taken very seriously or isn't very much expanded upon. I think this is the real point of mastery in this story's writing. After a while, the story beats seem neither corny nor entirely not corny. There's a John Green feel to Sidney giving up on his life and basically wandering about aimlessly, well, almost aimlessly, burning his books futilely in libraries across the country. At the same time, the groundwork has been laid for this moment in the movie to feel natural, if a bit John Greeny. That is exactly my point. The movie manages to make the viewer suspend their disbelief in the most exaggerated parts of it because of the soul-crushing realism that characterizes other aspects of it. I found Sidney's relationship with his father and Valeria's immaturity so real and pulverizing in their subtlety that when presented with Sidney singing his wife to her death, I accepted it without a complaint. Don't get me wrong, this movie isn't one of those in which a character has a major disability and the whole point of it is to depict their wreck of a life. You know, with the constant depressing, and rightly so might I add, tone, and the bleak cinematography. But it is the stark realism with which the film approaches some of the characters' problems, even and maybe mostly for a brief moment, that makes the viewer tolerate larger catastrophes in their extravagance. Funnily enough, what with being a wannabe film critic and whatnot, I find it fascinating how I like the fact that the film does not address these mini problems at all. Sidney's dad's disability, for example, is shown and hardly told, and isn't mentioned again almost at all during the latter two time frames. That would make for a complaint normally, but it doesn't. It's just there, and it feels right in the context of the film. I couldn't tell you why. I don't care if someone watching this quote-unquote analysis finds it pretentious or wrong factually or contrary to film critic laws and rules and regulations, because I felt inspired by this film. I did, I know I did, and that is my truth. Now that doesn't mean that how I interpret the truth is correct, but I am entitled to my attempt.